Joining us to talk markets, Iran and China, Kyle Bass, founder and chief investment officer at Heyman Capital. We usually talk to you about China, but since we're going to talk about Israel and Iran supplies a lot of the oil to China, it's all interrelated, as it seems everything is. Kyle, I didn't even retweet or do anything to what you included me on. You put my name on it yesterday. I'll read your tweet. To set Iran's nuclear weapons program back a decade or more, the United States must help finish the job. We're the only nation capable of dropping the GBU-57A. I guess that's the bunker buster. And I think, can only a B-2 bomber drop it? That's what I've been told. So the United States would have to be involved. You think it's something that, even though it might, our involvement in the whole war would be a lot more obvious and overt, and people like Tucker Carlson, and there's a lot of people that say, I voted for Trump to avoid this kind of stuff. I mean, immediately, I couldn't believe how much play that tweet got. Did you see it all, too?
I did see what Tucker, a lot of people are calling him Tucker Carlson now. I think that, I don't know where Tucker's foreign policy deviated, and as voters vote, we vote for our leadership to keep us safe. And I think the entire world realizes that the largest state sponsor of terror cannot possess a nuclear weapon. And unfortunately, the way that Iran has built its infrastructure, after I've consulted with our senior military leadership, many of which are friends of mine, tell me that it's going to require the U.S. to drop one of those huge bombs to get to two specific sites in Iran, Natanz and Fordow there in the center, just south of Iran. The Israelis can drop 5,000-pound bombs, but it requires us to drop the big ones. Only our B-2s can drop those right now. So, again, it requires our participation, Joe. You've probably seen that we've had a number of our B-2s move to Diego Garcia, which is an island just off if you want to Google it, just off the south, basically, that's just southeast of Iran in the Indian Ocean. And look, if we're going to finish this, if we're going to keep the largest state sponsor of terror from obtaining a nuclear weapon, then the United States, unfortunately, has to participate. And I think in reading what President Trump said last night and looking at the forced posturing of U.S. forces, again, we can go finish this and eliminate, at least set them back a decade in their nuclear ambitions. And, that doesn't mean bomb Tehran. That means bomb two nuclear sites in the middle of the desert. So, and I think it's necessary.
And the other thing that there was a lot of conjecture was whether it's even deeper than this bomb can actually penetrate to. And then other people, Kyle said, there's a way to do it with either special forces, and that things, at this point are so softened that the target has been softened from everything else that Israel has done, that you might be able to do it by actually going to the site itself and just destroying it.
Yeah, I mean, look, the primary talk amongst our military elite is the bomb. It's a 30,000-pound bomb. And maybe we have to drop 2 or 3 of them, Joe. But again, we're talking about remote sites in the middle of the desert. We're not talking about the U.S. forces putting boots on the ground in Iran, which is certainly what none of us want, right? None of us want war. But when the IEA and the international community realized that Iran had been lying to everyone all along about their nuclear enrichment moving from low enrichment to high very quickly, that's what forced Israel to attack, and it's what's forcing us to potentially participate. And again, these are things they're uncomfortable, and they are necessary, and we have to do it now. You can't wait until Iran actually obtains one of these bombs, because you and I both know what they're likely to do if they get one. So these are the tough decisions that real leadership has to make, Joe, and it looks like the world's leaders are making these decisions.
Yeah, I don't know how long you think this regime stays in power. You can't count on that, obviously. No one's got a problem with the Iranian people, but when a regime, repeatedly says, death to Israel, death to America, we're going to, our stated goal is the obliteration of the state of Israel. What are you supposed to do if you're Netanyahu? I don't.
Yeah, I mean,
so how do you how do you negotiate? Do you believe someone who says, "Oh yeah, we don't think that anymore"? I don't know how you negotiate a settlement.
Yeah, I mean, look, terrorists understand one thing, and it's violence. Unfortunately, that's the answer. There is no negotiating with terrorists. The U.S. Used to have a policy of never negotiating with terrorists or state sponsors of terror, and here we have a position where the world has kind of devolved over a long period of time to where we've allowed them to have these, let's say, nuclear enrichment facilities supposedly for civilian use in the nuclear power arena. And, the reason that Trump backed out of the nuclear talks with Iran in his first administration is they weren't adhering to their side of the bargain. And so we pulled out. And that is natural when the other side of at the other side of the table is just not living up to their obligations. And so now we know that they were lying all along. And that's why Israel and the U.S. are considering this. I think if you look at what the U.S. posture has done, Trump has said he wants a deal. He wants a deal. He wants to do it diplomatically. He wants a deal. He thinks there is something to do. And now he's saying, okay, well, Iran never wanted a deal. They were never going to allow inspectors in because they had spun up so much highly enriched uranium. So now all it is we have to finish this. We have to finish their ability, or let's just say their nuclear ambitions. We need to set back at least a decade by executing.
The parallels to WMDs in Iraq that I see everywhere too. I don't know. There's no question that we have a better idea and a better idea that they definitely aren't very close to obtaining a WMD. And in this case, I don't know, what were we worried about with Iraq, sarin or gas?
Well, if you remember, with Iraq, it was chemical weapons.
Chemical weapon.
I was talking with the firm that is about to begin cleanup in Syria, and they told me that there are 32 chemical weapons manufacturing sites in Syria alone, and that many of the chem weapons that Syria has came from Iraq. There was this concept that Saddam Hussein, when he knew we were coming, moved his chemical weapons to Syria. Syria has an enormous amount of chemical weapons, and the international community is looking to fund the cleanup of those weapons. Now, of course, the Iran conflict is putting a fair amount of, let's say, strain on the Middle East, and that chemical weapons cleanup is going to have to be delayed. But there are a massive number of chem weapons in Syria, many of which came from Iraq. So again, what we need to do is just promote global stability. And unfortunately, promoting global stability sometimes means taking action against the world's largest sponsor of terror.
Hey, Kyle, have you thought through to what comes next? How we fill the vacuum there? Because that has been the problem with Middle Eastern things. And again, not to excuse anything Iran's doing or to not try and take out nuclear weapons there, but what happens next?
Yeah, look, I'm going to give you a little bit of my ideology here, and forgive me if you can't connect the dots in the beginning, but look, inflation and what the U.S. Fed did by putting 40% more M2 in the market and pushing, call it 40-50% inflation between 2020 and 25 to the rest of the world in dollars. The entire world is priced in dollars. So whether you have another currency or not, everything's priced in dollars, and you just back solve for how much of your currency you have to put up. The rest of the world has this kind of negative convexity to the U.S.'s actions. So we push a bunch of inflation to the world, and what that does is further destabilize areas that were already bouncing along the bottom. So when you look at the Middle East, even with some of the oil producers, you look at the currency exchange rates of the greater Middle East, including countries with, like Turkey with 90 million people, and they've hyperinflated their currency away from 2020 to 2025. So the financial architecture of the Middle East has never looked this bad. The financial architecture of China has never looked this bad. And so this gets back to your question, Becky, what happens next? We have a ground war in Europe. We have India and Pakistan really showing some hostility again. We have Iran and its illegitimate proxies causing terror across the Middle East and world writ large. And now we have China staring down the barrel of the Taiwan Strait, and the U.S. Again, and our allies in Australia and Japan very much worried about what China does next. So my view is this inflation that got pushed to the world destabilized the world, especially the world's economies that weren't the bellwether economies. And I believe more war, more friction, more social tearing of the societies is coming because inflation was so large. It was, if you look at these charts of all the currencies of these countries, you see that in 2020, everything fell apart. Once COVID came about, and I can go chart by chart by chart with you. So that architecture is broken. So expect more conflict.
And we'll talk, next time, Kyle will talk about what it means for China, whether they sit back, Russia, whether they sit back. It's all connected, but we're almost done with the show, Kyle. Thanks. Squawk Box will be right back.